Hello everybody and welcome back to the Business Growth Club. This is your weekly recording, and in this week's recording we're going to look at pricing. We're going to look at the most popular pricing strategy, and we're going to use that as part of our pricing series. This is the third edition you will have received on pricing, to look at the effectiveness of a pricing strategy and to see how you can price for maximum profit in your business. Now, in today's session, we're going to look at the pricing story so far. We'll very quickly recap where we've been. But most importantly, and for the most part of the session, we're going to look at how do you price projects. How do you currently price your projects, whether you are a retail store, a restaurant, whether you're a trade, a service, or a product business. How do you currently price? Most of you will be using the same strategy, and we're going to be looking at that most common strategy. We'll look at whether it's the best strategy for you or if there might be a better alternative, and we're going to look at how you calculate that. And also, I'll warn you now, we may be in for a few shocks along the way. Okay, to very quickly recap where we've been, here's the example we used in the first video. We looked at a business that was currently selling 10,000 calendars a year at £3.50, and we asked what would happen if we added just £1.50 to make a selling price of £5. Well, we found that whilst that was only a £1.50 increase in the selling price, we actually doubled the profits, which means you can either make twice as much profit or you only have to sell half as many units. So just the difference of £1.50 can make a huge impact on this retail or product type of business. We also looked at a service or a trade business in the DVD that you will have received, and that looked at the situation of a business currently selling 100 items a year, and they wanted to know the impact of increasing prices by 10% or decreasing prices by 10%. We found that if you increase your prices just by 10%, then we only need to sell 85 of the 100 items a year. So we either have less jobs to do, so we can be freer to enjoy our time, focus on other areas of the business, grow the business, or we have the other 15 jobs where we just make more profit on them. However, if we decreased our prices by 10%, we needed to sell 122 items, not 100 items, meaning that we're busier, we're using more resources, we're running around like the headless chicken, and we're not making as much profit as we want to. So the difference of just 10% up or 10% down has a huge impact on your profitability. So that's the story so far. We've seen that pricing is hugely important. It might not be that you just need to grow your sales. It might be that you need to adjust your prices and you can achieve the profitability you'd like to achieve. Okay then, so let's have a look at today's recording and the focus for today's video. I'm going to ask you now, how do you currently price for your projects? Doesn't matter what type of business you are, whether it's a trade, a service, a retail, a product type business. How do you come up with that selling price in your business? Now, in my experience, 95% of business owners use what's called a cost plus pricing. You probably know that as markup. You add a 25% markup, a 50% markup, a 100% markup, a 500% markup. You add a certain markup to your costs, and that's how you come up with your selling price. Now, I said 95% of business owners. What about the other 5%? Well, 4 of the 5% use no pricing strategy at all, or they just match their competitors. And the 1% use a different pricing strategy. So today, as 95% of you will be using this particular pricing strategy, this markup pricing strategy, I'm going to look at it in detail. I'm going to look at whether you're using it properly, whether it's the best strategy for your business, and how to use it to price for maximum profit. Because if 95% of you are using it, and we've already accepted that pricing has a huge influence on your profitability, then it's pretty important that we get it right. Well, one word of warning before we proceed. There will be a couple of numbers in this, but I'm trying to keep them as simple as possible. I'm not trying to win any accountancy awards in this video. I'm trying to give it to people on a level that all business owners can resonate with and associate with and use in their business. So I'm going to use simple examples. There'll be a few numbers, but don't worry about them. I'll explain them all. But it's hugely important that if you're using this markup pricing strategy, that you get it right for your business. Okay then, let's start at the beginning and look at markup and see how we actually calculate markup. And the vast majority of you, as we go through this presentation on this slide, will say, yes, that's how I currently cost my jobs. So we're going to use an example of a builder, just because it's easy. We're going to say the builder does jobs, and we're going to imagine he does jobs for £1,000. So this particular job is £1,000. That's the cost to him. That's based on £700 for materials, bricks and cement and all of that sort of stuff, and £300 for labour. That's the lad who's on site with him who, for a couple of days, builds the wall or whatever. So basically the cost is £1,000. Now it doesn't matter what sort of business you're in, you will have what you believe is your cost, the cost of producing the products. Service sector business, retail business, trade business like this, it doesn't matter. The formula is the same. You come up with what you believe is the cost to you as a business, and then you add a markup. Now in something like a trade business, a 40% markup is realistic. It's quite a good markup actually. For a service sector business, you might have a 100 or a 200% markup, but it doesn't really matter because it's all based on a simple formula of taking the cost price, which in this example is £1,000, timesing it by that 40%, so 0.40, equals £400. So we want to add £400 on. We've already got £100, so we add the two together and we come up with a selling price of £1,400. So the cost is £1,000. We add a 40% markup. That gives us £400. We add the two together. We come up with £1,400. Very simple mathematics. It's actually a slightly long way of calculating markup, but it's probably the way that most business owners, in my experience, do it. So I'm showing you that. That's all you do. Take your cost, times it by your markup, add the two together. You come up with your selling price. It doesn't matter if that markup is 5% or 500%. The formula still works. I've not included VAT in this example because if you are VAT registered, you know what to do with VAT, so you don't need to worry about that for now. But essentially, this is how you come up with your prices. Okay, so let's have a look at how much profit the builder's making using the markup strategy. The job costs him £1,000 in materials and labour. All the bricks and everything he needs to build the job, and the lads on site to actually build it. It's priced at £1,400 because £400 of it is profit because of the markup. Let's imagine the builder does 100 jobs a year. Now we're just imagining that £1,000 is his average job in cost, so we marked it up by 40%. He'll have some bigger jobs and some smaller jobs, so let's just imagine that on average he does 100 jobs of selling them at £1,400. So he makes £400 per job, times that by 100 jobs a year, so he makes £40,000 profit, yeah? Because 400 times 100 jobs is £40,000. Okay? So he's making £40,000 profit. Do we all agree with this? Unfortunately, that figure is wrong. That isn't actually the profit figure. Now, I'm not trying to catch you out. I'm not trying to be clever. I'm trying to illustrate the number one mistake I see business owners making with their pricing. They've not actually fully costed the job. So they believe they're going to make a certain profit figure, which they're happy with, and then they realize they haven't costed it properly, and they make less profit than they thought. Let me explain what I mean in the following slide. Now, it's not an appropriate markup because it ignores overheads. Now, you might say, am I just being a boring accountant worrying about numbers? Well, let's have a look at our builder example and see if these numbers really matter. Now, the £40,000 we figured out on the other slide is actually gross profit. There is another £20,000 in overheads. Now, overheads are all those extra costs you have, but you're not including currently in your pricing model that have a big impact on your profitability. Overheads are stuff like rent and rates, office costs, all of your equipment you have in the office, all the stationery you use, travel expenses, admin expenses, insurance, accountancy, marketing costs, advertising, legal costs. If you're employing people, payroll costs, payroll taxes at 14% of your employees' salary, all the equipment you have to buy, all of the tools, your van or your vehicle or whatever you're using. So for this builder, he's spending £20,000 a year in overheads. Now I've picked that number because that's realistic. On a benchmark of this person's turnover, which is actually £140,000, a typical overhead as a UK average would be £20,000. So it doesn't matter if your business has a bigger turnover, a smaller turnover, a bigger or a smaller markup. The numbers work because we're all on a ratio basis. So essentially, The £40,000 we refer to, which is what we thought we were going to make, is actually the gross profit. We then need to take off £20,000, so 40,000 minus 20,000 is just £20,000 net profit. Now the builder was using a 40% markup, and he thought he was going to make a £40,000 profit, but he hasn't. Now don't worry at this stage, I'm going to show you how to price for this properly, but I want to just now stop for a few moments and say that most people make this mistake. The reason I'm showing you this is because people make this mistake all the time. The number of business owners who say to me, I believe I'm making £40,000 profit, but when it gets to the year end, or more importantly, I look at my bank balance, I'm not making anywhere near as much money as I want to. And they presume they've got a leaky bucket somewhere, or they say I've got a cash flow problem. But very often, it's a pricing problem. They've mistaken the pricing like this builder has, and they're making half as much profit as they anticipated. Now going from £40,000 profit to £20,000 profit is a massive jump. You've halved your profits, and business owners don't know why it's happened. Nearly always it's happened because we've not processed our pricing properly, and I'll show you how to do that in the next couple of slides. Another point I want to bring your attention to is a 40% markup is not 40% profit. That's not how it works. I don't want to explain the maths because I'll be here all day, and I don't want to bore you with numbers. But basically, if you want a 40% profit, that's known as a margin. I'll show you how to do that in the next video we'll do on pricing. But it's not. A 40% markup is not 40% profit. Far from it. So don't make that mistake either. So let's have a look how we should price this job. Okay, so how do we actually account for this properly so we use overheads so we get to the right price? It's actually very easy. We just need to factor in overheads into our pricing calculation. We first of all need to find out what our overheads are. We know from the builder they're £20,000. It will tell you in your accounts what your overheads are. They might be called indirect costs. Now, if you're not sure what they are, ask your accountant and they'll tell you it's an incredibly basic number, and they'll tell you what it is. And then you've got one of two options. An easy option and a quick option, and if you sell products which are, or services, or you do trade jobs which are roughly the same size, the same length, the same difficulty, you can just divide your overheads by the number of jobs. So for this builder, we're imagining that he does 100 jobs a year. They're all pretty much the same length, same complexity, so we just divide it by 100. So if you take 20,000 divided by 100 jobs, that means each job absorbs a overhead of £200. Very simple. The number of jobs or the number of products you've sold, or however you want to do it, divide that by your overheads and it will give you a figure. Now, if you do jobs of varying sizes, so sometimes you do a one-day job, sometimes you do a 10-day job, or something's more complicated or requires more materials, however it works, you then need to do something which is slightly more complicated, where you actually need to figure out your overhead as a percentage of that spend. Now, I don't want to show you how to do that in this video because it's ever so slightly more complicated. Your accountant should be able to show you how to do that in 5 minutes, or if you're unsure, just submit that as a question, and I'll send you a response. I'll have a very quick look. For me, it will take me 10 seconds to do that, but for me to explain it to you, it's quite complicated. But for most people, an crude way of costing, and I'm just trying to give you practical stuff that will work, you can just take the number of jobs or the number of days that you work a year and divide that by your overheads, and that comes up with a figure. If you're not sure how to do that, like I say, submit a question, send me that part of your accounts and I'll have a quick look at it. I don't want to spend too much time on the numbers, but really it's a very simple calculation. We figure out how much of our overhead is being used on each job. For the builder, it's just £200, so we just need to add that £200 to the pricing calculation. Okay, so we recall that the job costs £700 in materials, £300 in labour, and all we do is add that £200 overheads that we've calculated. So we add those together and that comes to £1,200, not £1,000. So we were doing ourselves £200 disservice. Now we're working on a 40% markup, so we take the 1200, we times it by the 40%, which gives you 480. Add the two together, that gives us a new selling price of £1,680. So this is how we actually price this properly. So if you're using markup, don't commit the mistake that the vast majority of business owners make, and then look at the accounts at the end of the year, or when you're checking your bank balance, and say, it's not working, I thought I'd made more money. It's because you haven't accounted for your overheads. And overheads for any business are a significant cost, and they reduce your profit, and you don't understand why. So if you're using 40% markup, that's how to do it properly. I hope that works for you. You might want to watch over this recording a few times just to figure out how to do it. If you've got any questions, ask me. But you should see it's actually a very simple calculation, and it works for every business. Now let's have a look at the builder's profit now that we're doing the calculations properly. The job is worth £1,200 in costs, overheads, materials and labour. So it's priced with that increase, that 40% markup, at 1680. That means there's £480 profit per job. Recall our builder does 100 jobs a year, so 480 times 100 gives you £48,000. Oh, okay, we have a bit of a dilemma here, don't we? We've ended up with £48,000 profit. I thought we were trying to get to £40,000 profit, and actually before we had £20,000 profit. So we've taken our profits from 20,000 to 48,000, not 40,000. We're still doing 100 jobs, and it's still a 40% markup. It's just we're doing the maths right now. Okay, so how many of you, faced with this problem, would actually start to lower your prices? You'd actually look at the calculations, say it can't possibly be right, so I'm going to have to reduce my prices. Okay, I've seen business owners do this countless times. Their strategy was right. They were using markup, the most common strategy the world over. It's not just the UK economy, the world over. We were just not very good at maths. We just didn't do our accounting properly. And why should we? We're a builder, not an accountant, so we don't know. Now we do know. We're still using 40% markup. We've just calculated it properly. Now lots of you will say to me that you're using a 40% markup for lots of different reasons. It might be because everybody uses a 40% markup. It might be because you can only get away with 40% markup in your industry. So you tell me. It might be because anything more than 40% markup is just completely unfair. You might tell me that customers will only accept a 40% markup. Or maybe even, I've always used a 40% markup. Now, are we happy? Because we have used a 40% markup, and now we're making much more profits. We've gone from 20,000 when we thought we were making 40,000 to making 48,000. We've added £28,000 to our profitability, and we're using the markup of 40%, and as you've just told me in the previous slide, everybody uses markup. You've always used markup. Customers won't tolerate more than 40% markup. Everyone in the industry uses a 40% markup. It's only fair to use a 40% markup. So I'm imagining you're all completely happy with what I've just said. Now, actually, based on my experience of working with hundreds of business owners, at this point, you're not quite happy. Now, you were completely fixed on 40% markup. You said, that's just the way it's going to be. I'm working 40%. Now, it doesn't matter if your markup is 5%, 40%, 100%, 500%. You were fixed with that markup. You said that that was fair. However, you can't change now just because you got better at mathematics. You can't slightly increase your profits and your prices so your business is more profitable and more successful, and all of a sudden start going weak at the knee at the 40% markup, because you were so fixed on markup. You told me that you couldn't change markup. By the way, your prices always went up because your materials went up and your labour went up, but you told people that that was acceptable. So you're charging £1,000 for the job, like our builder is, and then you decide materials have gone up, bricks have gone up £100. So you put up your prices by £100 because that's fair. Why is it fair? Because I'm using a 40% markup, and markup is the strategy everybody uses, so it must be fair, it must be acceptable. However, the way I've just shown you is the proper way to do markup, and it's actually what most of the big companies do. So you wonder why the big companies are a little bit more expensive. It's generally speaking because they've got somebody who's looking at the prices properly and they're using markup properly. It's probably the same percentage markup, however, they're doing it differently. They're doing it correctly. So you've just become better at mathematics, and that means that your business is more successful. Now, I know from my experience of working with so many business owners on pricing that you're still not quite sure if this is fair. And it's not fair because your profits have massively jumped up and you're not quite sure what's going on. Now, if you lose a job at 40% markup because somebody says, well, can you match the price of Bob Smith down the road? And you say, I can't possibly match that price because it's just ridiculously low. You feel justified because you've used a fair pricing model of 40% markup like everybody else, and you just can't match that price. That's ridiculous, and that's fine. You know you still lose jobs on that basis. However, you believe that increasing your prices because you're getting better at pricing is unfair. Business owners generally say that price rises based on costs are fair, but prices based on profits are unfair. Well, actually, what's fair is that you're rightfully rewarded for your skills, your dedication, and the difference you make to people's lives. It's not more justifiable to increase your prices by £100 because the cost of bricks has gone up by £100 as it is to actually fully cost your business, absorb your overheads, and put them into the mix. You're using the same formula, which is a fair formula, you're just being rightfully rewarded. Do you see how this opens up a wider question? Because before I started this video, if I said to you, what do you need to do to grow your business? You probably would have told me, I need to get more sales. I need to make more sales. But do you? Do you need to make more sales? I actually think your profitability is more affected by your prices. I think you need more profit, not more sales, and that is only achieved by pricing. Now, I've talked about this before, and I'm talking about it again because I know it's a very difficult journey for business owners to take, but it really is the journey to profitability. Now, I've talked before about what I called your bad pricing habit. The fact that you were stuck in a bit of a rut and you just did pricing the way you always did it, which is generally speaking a fixed markup, 40% because that's what everybody does. Now, in this example, your bad pricing habit just became very useful. Your bad pricing habit, the fact that you're resistant to change and you're sticking to your 40% markup line, just became very useful because you've just taken your profits from £20,000 to £48,000, a massive increase. You've more than doubled your profits. You've had a 150% increase in your profits. Do you see how so much of business success is actually just psychology? It's changing your psychology as a business owner and getting less resistant to price changes, and it's actually getting into the buyer psychology and the buyer psychology of your customers and figuring out where they're coming from. And you put the two together and you become more successful, your profits grow, your business will change, and you'll have success. I've said it so many times before, I'll say it again in the future. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. Okay? And you can't have that in your business. You've got to take yourself out of your comfort zone, and you've got to do stuff a little bit differently. And all I'm illustrating in this slide is for you to do your costing properly and use the same methodology, and your prices will increase. If you listen to all of the videos together on pricing, you've had one video like this. This is the second one like this. You've also had the DVD on not being talked down on price. In the future couple of videos, we'll look at other pricing strategies, and we'll talk about how not to be affected adversely when you increase prices and how to deal with that. When you bring it all together as a series, I absolutely guarantee it will dramatically influence your profitability. I've worked with people to double their profits just on this system, and they're very resistant at the start. They dip their toe in, they change stuff around in their business, and then in 6 months or a year's time, their profits have been doubled, not necessarily because of an increase in sales, but because of profitability. Now add that profitability which comes via the pricing, doubling your profits, to the impact of more sales and better conversion and more products, all of the stuff we're going to show you to do in future videos, and you'll actually see how your profits really can dramatically explode. and that's what we're here to help you to do. So when you bring it all together, it's a process. I can't show you how to increase your prices on a 5-minute slide like this, and it will all work in your business and you'll have no resistance and it'll be changed overnight. But what I can do is I can give you a series of solutions and a series of processes you can go through in your own psychology so that you can begin to change the business. And when you bring it all together as a holistic solution, you'll see that that's the path to more profitability. And no, it's difficult, but every successful business has to go on this journey. And if there's one journey I can pick for you to go on, it will be this pricing journey. It's as important as the target marketing we talk about. It's an absolute pillar of business growth. Okay, so why do people use markup? Moving away from the psychological point, why do people always use markup? I've talked about habits. It's basically because most people use it. Okay, it's quick and easy. It's really quick. It takes you 10 seconds, and you can do it for all your jobs, whether it's a big job, a small job, a different job, a job you've never done before. You don't really know any alternatives, so what other pricing strategies can you use? However, I would say that's not a strategy to base your business on. And we're going to look at actually whether you should be using markup or whether you should start to use other strategies. Because I wouldn't like to lead the success of my business down to the fact that other people use it, it's quick and easy, and I know no other alternative. That's not the mindset of a successful business owner. It's a mindset of somebody who doesn't know an alternative. I'm going to give you alternatives. Okay, so let's look if markup is the right strategy for you, not just the habit strategy because everybody else uses it. Now, there are some advantages to markup. It's easy and it's widely applicable. Whatever you're selling, you can use. Now, it does take account of what I've called supply chain fluctuations. Basically, say you're a printer and you know that paper prices keep going up and up and up and up and up. It's actually very easy on markup to change that because you keep it the same markup, you just change your cost. There's another something about markup which it actually always ensures a profit is made. Now, there are some other pricing strategies which don't do that. So it's not a bad one. There's a reason why most people use it. It does focus on profit. It's also easy to increase the markup. You can take your markup from 40% to 45% or 50% or 60%. Honest. I know you don't believe me just yet. You will do at the end of these videos, but you really can just say, there's my cost. I'm not timesing it by 40%. I'm going to times it by 50%, and you can increase your prices that way. So I'm not necessarily saying don't use markup. I'm saying don't use it just because everyone else does and it's easy. I'm saying let's pick the right strategy. So there's the reasons for using markup. But let's have a look at why you might not want to use markup. The problem with markup is it's forever limited to costs, and hence it looks backward and not forward. It's all about you and not your customer. And if there's something I assume you've taken from the videos and all of the advice I've given you, is you need to build your business around your customer and not about you, because it's your customer's needs that should come first, not your needs. It also doesn't take into account demand in the marketplace. It says nothing about your competitors, because if you use the same 40% markup as Cowboy Builder up the road, that means you're the same price. But Cowboy Builder up the road, well, you're better, you're more reliable, you've used all of the techniques we've talked about before, such as guarantees and USPs and good marketing and positioning and buyer psychology, so you should be charging more. Markup can't account for any of those. It's a very crude and simple measure. There's also no proof that the customer will pay that price or more, or even dare I say less. It's just a guess. Everyone's saying I'm going to use a 40% markup or a 20% or 100% because that's what people do. So there's no real proof that the price is right. It could be 40% markup or whatever you're fixed on is not good or it's not bad. It's not the optimal price. It's just guesswork. It's very, very crude, and it tends to be based on historical trends. So what are the other alternatives? Well, in the next video in the pricing series, I'm going to give you some other pricing strategies for you to consider. Ones that are a little bit more based on the target market, on demand, competition, USP, and positioning. So actually you can take advantage of all the great stuff you've implemented on the basis of the advice that we've already given you. So I'll give you some other strategies and I'll show you how to calculate them, like I've showed you how to calculate markup today. And you can decide in the next video which one's best for your business. Or you can ask me in the webinar and I'll kind of give you the benefit of my opinion. Now that's with the sole aim of increasing your profits. I'm here to help you to build a better business, a more profitable business, a more enjoyable business, a better business. And pricing, as I've said in this video, is a really quick way and a really effective way to get to increased profits, increased enjoyment, and just a better, more enjoyable business for you to run. So hopefully we've learned so far today that pricing, markup pricing, is the most common strategy. It is limited, but it does work, so long as you calculate it properly. And we've also proven, because we calculated it incorrectly and then we showed you the difference when we calculated it correctly, that prices and profits can increase. Proof that we can grow the business and grow the profits. So even in the next video, if you decide you don't want to use any other pricing strategies, you just want to use markup, at least now you know a little bit more about the strategy. You know how to calculate it properly, which is absolutely crucial because you won't have profit creep. And also you'll know the limits, so you've got a little bit more background and you've proven that you can grow your prices. So I hope this has been useful. I hope it's shown you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and you can grow your business, and it's not necessarily about getting more sales, it's sometimes about changing your strategy. Any questions, as always, please submit them to the webinar and I'll be very happy to answer them. So you'll hear from me again in a week's time. Until then, have a fantastic time in business. Take care for now.